Today we're looking at Shorter Catechism question number 32, and the question is, what benefits do they that are effectually called partake of in this life? Answer, they that are effectually called do in this life partake of justification, adoption, and sanctification, and the several benefits which in this life do either accompany or flow from them. Imagine if I were to get on Facebook and post a poll, and the question is, are good works necessary to salvation? I think it is safe to say that most people would say no. In fact, some people might even comment down below with an emphatic no. They might even quote to you Isaiah 64, where it says that our righteous deeds are like a polluted garment. There is absolutely no way, they would tell us, that salvation involves good works. But would it shock you to hear that the Italian Genevan Reformed theologian Francis Turretin answered this very same question with, yes, we affirm? Would it shock you to hear that if you were to read the Westminster Confession of Faith, which is, in my opinion, one of the best summaries of the Christian faith, in its chapter on good works, it states that good works done in obedience to God's commandments, and it goes on to say, which bear fruit unto holiness, and have as their end result eternal life. How can this be? If you Google the words Calvinism, heresy, work salvation, page after page will pop up exposing the heresy of Calvinism and the Reformation, stating things like, quote, this is a direct quote from one of the top sites, Calvinism is synonymous with work salvation. Some of this is even said by people who identify as Reformed or consistent sovereign gracers. So what's going on here? How do we make sense of all this? Well, we have to keep reading. After affirming that good works are necessary to salvation, Turretin immediately states, quote, since the practice and desire of good works pertains to sanctification, it cannot be better ascertained than by getting a proper knowledge of their nature. So notice very carefully, the question was, are good works necessary to salvation? And after affirming that they are, Turretin then immediately draws our attention to the particular doctrine of sanctification. Why is he bringing up sanctification in a question about salvation? Is he suggesting that sanctification is salvation? Is he suggesting that if we want to understand what salvation is that all we have to do is study sanctification? No, that is not at all what he is saying. For you see, Turretin understood, that's Calvin did in the Westminster Divines, that when the Bible talks about our salvation in its fullest sense, that is, in its fullest meaning, it involves a whole package of saving graces and their benefits. And I think I've used this illustration here before. Think of salvation as a big gift box from God. It's a single box. They're not multiple boxes. God then opens the box, and instead of just handing you a single item, he starts handing you one thing after another throughout time. It's all a gift. It's all undeserved on your part. It's all in one box. But as you begin to unwrap this gift, you see that it is comprised of numerous things, or as our catechism calls them, benefits. You see, the mistake that so many people make is that they want to make salvation synonymous with justification alone. That's why affirming the role of good works in our salvation shocks them. That's why certain sovereign gracers, and that's not a title unique to them, but it's one they like to use. That's why they disparage the necessity of the believer to be active in obedience, and they fail to understand the role of the law in the life of the believer. That's why hyper-preterists can say with a straight face that all prophecy has been fulfilled and that their salvation has been fully applied, even when they act like a bunch of pagans. That's why certain hyper-Calvinists will equate election with justification and then act as though there was never a time in their life when they were at enmity with God. They do not understand it when it comes to the question of good works. The relationship of works to our salvation has to be explored with respect to the various benefits. In other words, the relationship of works will look differently with respect to justification than it will to respect to sanctification. So yes, when we are justified, that is, when God legally declares us righteous, based solely upon the righteousness of Christ imputed to us, our works, which are indeed as filthy as rags, do not contribute or merit us anything. But what happens after God has justified you? Is God done with you? Does he say to you, okay, I've declared you righteous solely based on the imputed righteousness of Christ. Now, take care and feel free to live however you want. Oh, the law? Don't worry about it. It's got nothing to do with you. That's the understanding of salvation that so many people have, and it's wrong and it's dangerous. That's the truncated view of salvation that I once had. Is it any surprise then that after conflating justification and sanctification, that I would go on to conflate justification and sanctification with glorification, and then begin to entertain the absolutely absurd and damnable notion that the consummation is a done deal and that my salvation is fully realized? But isn't that the logical end to all of this? Listen, you may never come to embrace hyperpreterism, but I'm telling you, if you fail to understand the fullness of salvation in all of its various parts and applications, if you start to conflate these saving graces and benefits as a free gracer would, or a consistent Calvinist, or whatever label they want to use, you are certainly on the pathway to hyperpreterism. It may take you a while to get there. You may never arrive there because you just ran out of time and didn't work out the implications of your own view. But I'm telling you, you are en route. Paul writes in Romans 8, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Moreover, whom he did predestinate, them he also called. And to whom he called, he also justified. And to whom he justified, he also glorified. This is why Paul can write in one place, having been saved. Then in another place write, we are being saved. And then finally in another place write, will be saved from the wrath of God. This is the reality of our salvation that the divines are pointing us to, having introduced it with question 32 of the Catechism. Questions 33 through 36 will explore each of these saving graces and their benefits that are experienced in this life. And then in questions 37 and 38, we will explore the benefits to be received in the future at our death and then at our resurrection. Numerous saving graces with numerous benefits, past, present, and future. This is our great salvation. And don't let anyone, through their ignorance, immaturity, and blindness, try to ruin your life as they have done to many others and rob you of the comfort, encouragement, and joy that comes in understanding this great salvation in its fullest meaning.